Welcome to A Better Black America, the radio show edition. We're going to call this podcast number 1 because we got to have this conversation. So over the holidays, we went viral. I put out a clip on my social media page, on my A Better Black America Talk radio show page on Facebook. And we're already up to over 70,000 followers and subscribers. So if you are on Facebook, hit that notification, hit that subscription, because we're going to have this conversation. So I put out a clip and it sparked over 2 million views and over 4,000 comments. And the conversation was about reparations. And I've been seeing and having these reparations conversations for the last 5 years. OK, if you did not know, I was a part of multiple studies, and the last one was at Charles Drew University here in L.A. And come to find out, it got to the governor's desk and he's vetoed the bill because it passed the California State Assembly. And it was actually Proposition 6, and we voted it down in the state. And a lot of individuals say, oh, why do we have to pay reparations? And you guys wasn't slaves and all of that. No, this is something that was promised by the federal government. And now time is undefeated, and generations, will be benefiting from this. So if your birth certificate once again says Negro and or colored, more than likely you're a direct descendant of the American slave trade prior to the Mayflower. So a lot of individuals don't realize it was a lot of indigenous native African tribes here prior to the arrival of Columbus. And we're going to have this conversation right now. So I got to give you the receipts. OK, like I said, podcast number 1, knowledge is power and God's people shall not perish due to the lack of it. So I'm going to give you some receipts because a lot of people want to hate. They want to debate. And more than likely, you're going to have the Divine 9 members challenge. But I'm going to give you some talking points today to basically, let them know that, we figured it out. Because, like I said, I'm one of the founders of the Privileged People 1619. And on August 20th of the year 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia, the first documented, 20 odd brothers from, the Portuguese slave trade was, documented in Jamestown, Virginia. And this is the starting point. And then Project 1619, they went back to Africa. But we're going to stay right here, keep that same energy. And we're going to talk and have a conversation today about the individuals that was present here, and that we got a direct correlation, promises and all of that. But we got canceled, by, I'm going to give you the information. So let's get into it. So now let me see here. And there's been a bill that's been on multiple occasions that has literally, let me see here. Let me see. There we go. So we're going to go before it. So we're going to go before the Mayflower. Okay. Before the Mayflower. Okay. And we got to have this conversation because a lot of people really don't understand that God's people shall not perish due to the lack of knowledge. Now, before the Mayflower, there isn't a single or exact number of Black Indian tribes. Yes, I said Black Indian tribes. OK, a lot of people don't realize that. They think, it was only the I would say the red Indian or the lighter shaded Indians. But they came from the West. OK, we were here. OK, now let me see here. A number of Native American nations, OK, contain significant African ancestry, forming what history calls Black Indians. OK, we're talking about the Black Indians, the Negroes. OK, and one would wonder, why would they take away, the Redskins and the Indians and all of this? Because they basically is trying to hide the history, because they knew without a shadow of a doubt, time is undefeated. We're literally going to figure it out. So basically, we got social media, we got AI, we got all of these things right now. So we could basically just get straight to the point. So how many Black Indian tribes? Point blank. How many Indian tribes? OK, now in the book Before the Mayflower, Bennett points out, this was widespread, not limited to just 1 or 2 tribes. And he discusses dozens of tribes and community, especially in the Southeast, which is which most commonly cited includes the Seminoles, OK, out of Florida, the Creek, Muscogee, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Yamasi, and you can correct me, okay, because I said the Trail of Tears and, everybody went crazy, okay. I mean, I said Trail of Tears and I was going to take it down, but it already had 1 million views, so I left it up. So it's Trail of Tears. That's going to be, episode number 2. We're going to talk about the Trail of Tears, meaning they marched all the black Indians out of the South or either forced them into slavery. But let's just stay on point. Now, the Seminoles, the Creek, let me see, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Yamasi, Yamasse, and the Lumbee, and that's out of the Carolinas. Now, in addition, the author of the book, Bennett, describes many maroon communities, runaway enslaved Africans who merged with native nations, meaning the true number is impossible to fix precisely. Now, his argument is that Black Indian identity was a major recurring reality in early Americas, not the exception. Now, how did they get there? Now, how did they get to North America? Good question. According to Before the Mayflower, there are 2 main pathways, with one beginning historically solid and the most debated. Now, African arrival after 1492. And I said 1492, way before Columbus, way before 1619. This is why when they hijacked the project, in terms of 1619 and went back to Africa, that was the Divine Nine's contribution to basically trying to keep, the natives and to keep blacks or to keep the African Americans at bay, because the Divine Nine is a part of that secret society, and their job is to keep their own people behind the 8 ball. But time's up and time's undefeated. This is why voting for the lesser of 2 evils don't work for us anymore, because we refuse to do that, because, we're the remnant and we will be the difference makers, and y'all talking about Project 2025. This is Project 2026, the black man standing up. It is what it is. Now, let me see here. African arrival after 1492, primary explanation. Now, this is the main explanation, that's supported by most scholars. Now, enslaved Africans were brought to North America via the Atlantic slave trade. And people don't realize that the slave trade has been going on prior to 1619. More than likely, it was going down with the Portuguese slave trade. And they were bringing people to the Americas and taking people south. And it was us enslaving us. Okay, because I remember a book when I was in elementary school and my teacher read it, Mr. Paul, and on the cover it had Indian black people enslaving black people. Okay, that was our hustle, but we got knocked by the white man. Okay, that's what we were doing. And this is why it makes sense to where we have the boule, the bourgeoisie, the Divine Nine, playing that part, because they looking out for their tribe, and their Divine Nine members to basically keep the rest or the least of these at bay. Now, enslaved Africans were brought to North America via the Atlantic slave trade. Many escaped plantations and they found refuge among native tribes. Now, over generations, intermarriage, adoption, and alliance created Black Indian communities. I'm going to say that again. Okay, over generations, intermarriage, adoption, and alliance created Black Indian communities. So there were Black Indian communities prior to 1619, prior to the documentation of the transatlantic slave or the odd Negroes into Jamestown, Virginia. Now, the Seminoles are the clearest example. Okay, the Seminoles out of Florida. And it's crazy that Florida State is the Seminoles. And the Seminoles is the clearest example. So closely allied with Africans that the U.S. fought entire wars, the Seminole Wars, to break their alliance. Meaning, the U.S. fought to keep them divided because they knew if they were to link up together, it would be a problem. And that problem, has been at bay. And right now in the 2026, we are going to solve the problem. And it's going to happen within this physical year because you can't, the data is there. Okay. The clock ran out. Time is undefeated. Now, number 2, possible African presence before Columbus. Discussed but cautious. Now, Bennett mentions evidence and theory suggesting. Now, Africans may have reached the Americas before Columbus, which we know that they have based on the documentation. Now, some native accounts as early Europeans' observation describe dark-skinned people. And this is why they got rid of that red skin on the Washington Redskins, and now they called it the Commanders, in which they were named after Joe Biden's dog, which is Commander. Okay, now, however, we got to be careful, okay, because this ideal presented a possible but not definitive, proven, and not required to explain Black Indians. Now, the bottom line is no fixed number. There were many Black Indian tribes and communities. They formed mainly after 1492 through escape from slavery, plus the alliance with the native nations. And this predates the Mayflower and challenges the idea that Black presence in America began with Jamestown or slavery alone. Now, that pretty much debunks, we just arrived in 1619 because we were already here. And as kids, we do know that Columbus came and, they fed them and created Thanksgiving. And then when they came back, what did they do? So, and in terms of the reparations aspect of it, now we had the conversation and I basically said, if you got Negro on your birth certificate or colored, then more than likely, in terms of the reparations conversation, those individuals will be getting the payouts. Meaning if you are a baby boomer or Generation X. And the only way we could do this is to have this conversation. So hit the notification, hit the subscription. Let's have this conversation, because we're going to take this and present this to the federal government. Because the only thing that we need to be having these conversations with are Congress members and, our senators and all of that. But you see what's going on. They're the opposition of the federal government. So if we take this to the federal government, then the federal government, has the power and the authority to do so. So when it comes to reparations, now the Indians, okay, clearly we was here, we was present. Now the Indian reservations included Black people, and that was the freedmen. Okay, and Abraham Lincoln created the Freedmen's Bank Bureau. Write that down, the Freedmen's Bank Bureau, meaning home loans, business loans, loans to buy property. $8 million was put aside for the newly freed slave. Okay, but clearly he was assassinated, and Andrew Johnson, did what he did, the vice president at the time. So 5 civilized tribes and freedmen. Okay, now here's the good part. Okay, 5 civilized tribes and freedmen. Now, let me go ahead and make that a little bigger. Okay, now after the Civil War, okay, the United States required several tribes, okay, to free enslaved Black people and grant them rights through the treaties in 1866. These tribes were the Cherokee Nation, the Choctaw Nation, the Chickasaw Nation, the Creek Nation, and the Seminole Nation. Okay, now what the treaties required: former enslaved Blacks, freedmen, became citizens of those tribes. Think about it. Never heard this before. Okay, former enslaved Blacks, the freedmen, became citizens of those tribes. Okay, they were entitled to land, annuities, and treaty benefits. Rights were meant to be equal to native citizens. I'm gonna say that again. The rights were meant to be equal to native citizens. But what happened? They did everything to pull us apart. They did everything to separate us. And this is the pathway back, so we can actually demand it and we can end racism here in the United States, because it's basically the rights were meant to be equal to native citizens. So separate but equal was the thing. OK, and you wonder what happened when everybody went west and created Black Wall Street and other Black towns, OK, that the federal government destroyed. OK, now in 1887, OK, the Dawes Act land allotments. OK, now under the Dawes Act, tribal land was divided into individual plots. OK, freedmen of the 5 tribes received land allotments. OK, that's ALLOMENTS. OK, freedmen of the 5 tribes received land allotments, meaning if you was a member of those tribes, you got land. OK, but somehow, some way, they gave the land to, and separated us and forced us. But I'm going to basically make it make sense. Okay. Now, the Seminole freedmen, okay, got a unique case. Now, the Seminole freedmen, fought wars alongside Seminoles against the United States. Okay. The Seminoles were so strong that they fought, the Seminole Wars against the federal government. Okay. Just like the Civil War. Okay. They fought against them. Okay, because this was a strong culture, strong group of people who was native to this land and wasn't going to go into slavery without a fight. Okay, without a fight. Now, the Seminole freedmen fought wars alongside Seminoles against the U.S., were recognized as full tribal members, meaning recognized as full tribal members, received land payments under the U.S. Seminole treaties. Now, this is one of the clearest examples of black peoples receiving reparation benefits via Indian treaties. And the point is to bring up the Indian treaties because if your birth certificate says Negro, because there were Negro Indian tribes. Okay, 5 to be exact, or 5 that's been documented. Now, the modern legal battles in the late 20th and 21st centuries. Now, the descendants, this is the key. Now, the descendants of the freedmen sued for restoration of citizenship and benefits. Now, notably, the Cherokee Nation courts reaffirmed freedmen citizenship rights tied to the treaty obligations. Now, these cases confirm that freedmen were never outsiders. Okay. They were treaty recognized beneficiaries. Think about that. I'm going to say that again. These cases confirm that freedmen were never outsiders. They were treaty recognized beneficiaries. So what I'm saying is, run us our bread. No, but I'm saying it's like knowledge is power. Okay. Knowledge is power. And what the world is doing and what AI is doing and all of that, this is why, what's going on politically. This is why the Democratic Party is under so much scrutiny, turning out to be the scam party and all of this, because they knew that it was going to be a matter of time that the truth was going to come out and the truth shall make us free. Because like I said, in modern legal battles, in the late 20th and 21st century, descendants of the freedmen sued for restoration of citizenship and benefits. Notably, the Cherokee Nation courts reaffirmed freedmen citizenship rights tied to the treaty obligation. Now, these cases confirm that freedmen were never outsiders. They were treaty recognized beneficiaries. And the key is, for me, is that the descendants of the freedmen sued. So remember when Johnny Cochran, before he was somehow died, he said that he was going to put together a group and sue the federal government for reparations. Okay, it's delayed but not denied, and it's already here. And if you are a baby boomer or Generation X, then we got to take this lawsuit. Whether it's by pro bono or just in the public media or the social media realm, to basically force them to do what they were supposed to do, because we were never outsiders. And your birth certificate says, and this is why they started switching it up, in terms of your ethnicity and all of that. Okay, now the bottom line, there were Indian reparations and treaty benefits that included black people, but the black people was ostracized and never paid out. Now there were most symbolic, but included land, money, and legal status. They were rooted in binding federal treaties, not goodwill, rooted and bounded and binded in federal treaties, not goodwill, meaning how they say, we'll just give an apology. We don't want your goodwill. Okay, because these are binding federal treaties that's on the books. And this is what happened. This is what the federal government did. And this is what the Democratic Party did. And this is why, if you are a black man, if you are a Negro, if you colored, abandon the party and let the immigrants, the transgenders, the LGBTQ LMNOP, and the abortion community and the white Karens, women's live community have the party, because this is what happened. This is what they did. And this is what Lyndon B. Johnson did with the Civil Rights Acts, because we thought we was about to, be separate but equal. But based on the Kerner Commission, they created the ghetto. Okay, and convince anybody of a sound mind to leave the ghetto and to live amongst, the others in the suburbs, and let the ghetto just be what it is. So now we got to, do what we got to do our first work over, because many of these benefits was later stripped away leading to the ongoing legal disputes. I'm going to say that again. The Democratic Party stripped everything away, which is leading to the legal disputes right now. And they continue to just, play these games with us. And that's the crazy part about it. They continue to play these games, and individuals want to sit back and say, oh, they don't deserve reparations. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just knowledge is power. Okay. So I'm going to just get this to you straight up. And this was here in native land, not as outsiders, but look what they did for the Japanese. Now, the Japanese American, let me see here. Internment reparations in 1988. So Japanese Americans got paid out in 1988 under Ronald Reagan. Was that Reagan? Let me see here. I think that was Reagan. Let me see here. But maybe Clinton. Okay. But the Japanese Americans got reparations in 88. Okay. Now, I don't remember no wars or no atomic bombs in 1988. So what I'm saying is these things come generations later. So the generations later is the baby boomers and Generation X, meaning the baby boomers and their children. Okay. And like I said, the Japanese internment reparations in 1988. Now, and they called it the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 in United States Congress. Who was paid? Japanese Americans who was imprisoned in World War II. What happened? There were forced relocation. Okay. Trail of Tears. They forced us to relocate to get out the South. Pretty similar. Now, what happened? Forced relocation, incarceration into internment camps. Now, for us, mass incarceration. Okay, think about it. Mass incarceration. 94 crime bill, 3 strikes and you out. Okay, locking us up, creating, this mass incarceration, global, construct in terms of 40% of the world's prisoners being, prisoners being behind bars. In America, we only 6% of the global population, and that's crazy. So the compensation was $20,000 per surviving individual and an official apology from the U.S. government. Okay, Gavin Newsom then gave an apology many times, but he gave an apology after, he denied the bill, and just to recognize, but they got an apology and cash payouts, and it basically said $20,000 per surviving individual, meaning the survivor itself or the direct descendant. Okay. And what was paid out back in 88? And I was totally right. Okay. They paid out $1.6 billion to some foreigners here in this country. Look at the advantage that the Japanese got in terms of that $20,000. So basically overall $1.6 billion, which is less than the fraud that's going on in Minnesota. We're going to have these conversations. Okay. We're going to keep the same energy. So this is number 1 of the podcast when it comes to the reparations. And I'm going to keep the same energy, and we will continue to have these conversations to build our case on a national scale, because literally this is a class action lawsuit against the federal government. And we got the documentation where they're going to have to pay out. And it was signed into law by Ronald Reagan. Okay. Japanese Americans was paid out $20,000 per surviving individual in 1988, plus an official apology. Okay. We got an apology, but no payout. Okay. They were relocated, meaning we had to leave. We fled the South and had to come west, had to go north. And some individuals wound up in Canada. And incarceration. Okay. Mass incarceration. Same thing. A total of $1.6 billion signed into law by Ronald Reagan. Okay. And this is the most cited example of reparations in the United States. Okay. So if anybody want to say, oh, why? Okay. Well, in 1988, they paid the Japanese individuals here in America. That didn't even happen over here. And this atrocity has happened here in the United States. And, and we're supposed to just be quiet and don't say anything, because now we realize that somehow, our leaders have sold their soul, and, it is what it is. Number 2, Native American tribal settlement, multiple cases. I just, put us in the mix in terms of the Negro tribes, the top 5. Okay. So the Native American tribal settlements. So they didn't want to give us Native American status, and this is why they changed our birth certificates from colored, from Negro to a ethnicity. Okay, even though we never been to Africa, but somehow they wanted to just tell us who we are, and we're basically Native American. Okay, Native American. And key examples now: the Indian Claims Commission, and this was from 1946 to 1978. Settled land seizures claim, meaning they gave them their land back. Now, over 1.3 billion paid to tribes. 1.3 billion paid to tribes between 1946 and 1978. Okay. And let me see here. Mismanagement of native trust funds. Okay. Well, the federal government could be guilty of that. And then also a 3.4 billion settlement. Okay, which funds went to individuals, tribes. Now, these tribes, kind of like a play, because I got to do the research, and I need you guys to help me out as well. You could send information, you could tag informational links in the comment, but these individuals, 3.4 billion in terms of a settlement, funds went to individual tribes. Now, who are these individual tribes in 1946 and 1978? They were still together. Okay, but I looked up the leader of the Cherokee Indians, and it's a white man. And every time I look at the individuals, a lot of white people involved, with feathers and stuff as if it was them. But they hijacked the situation, just like, Project 1619 tried to hijack, my project, which is Privileged People 1619, when they went back to Africa. But we're going to stay right here and document what we was doing before they even got here. Okay. And the crazy thing about it now, these payments address broken treaties, stolen land, and mismanaged assets. Okay. Number 3, Rosewood Massacre, the reparations, let me see here, in Florida. So Rosewood happened in 1923. Okay. But in 1994, okay, the survivors and descendants of the Black town destroyed in 1923 received $150,000 for each living survivor or their descendant. Meaning, if you survived that and you got descendants, their descendants got $150,000. Okay. And the total, let me see here, number for that was 2.1 million. And it was significant because the first state level reparations for racial violence. Okay. For racial violence. And then here, number 4, clearly the Tulsa Race Massacre, and they pretty much put out limited reparations from 2021, and then it has a slash for later, meaning, if you are a descendant of that, and my family came from Oklahoma, Tulsa to be exact, and wound up in Watts, California, and my great grandfather, Daddy Jack Townsend, would tell me these stories, and it was before the projects was built, because they worked on building the projects and brought a lot of people in. But before that, it was balling. Multiple parcels of land. My great grandmother had a garden, and to me it looked like the Garden of Eden. She had preservatives, grapes, peaches. I even had cherry trees, had a koi pond, and this was in the city of Watts prior to all of this madness. So it is what it is. So let me see here. Now, this is off. Let me see here. Now, for Black Wall Street, the destruction of Black Wall Street District, compensation. And this is sad. This is why it says, bam, later, meaning we'll break it all off later. No direct cash reparations to survivors historically. Later efforts included scholarships, memorial funding, limited grants not equivalent to losses. Now, this is often cited as reparation denied, not paid. Okay, it is what it is. So just like them, they got denied. We're being denied right now. But this is a crazy thing. So let me just tie it into modern day's time. Have you heard of HR 40? Now, HR 40 is a reparations bill that has been introduced to Congress multiple times. Okay, I remember Sheila Jackson Lee did it prior to her death during COVID. And so most recently, let me just break it down. What is HR 40? Okay, HR 40 is a bill in the United States House of Representatives officially tied to the Commission to study and develop reparation proposal for Americans Acts. it would establish federal commission to study the history of slavery in the United States and the effects of slavery and subsequent racial discrimination on African Americans, assesses appropriate remedies, including proposals for reparations, and make recommendations to Congress, which could include formal apology and compensation. So they keep on introducing this thing pretty much every year. Now, in the current form, in the 119 Congress, 2025-2026, the bill was introduced on January 3rd of 2025 by Ayanna Pressley, a Democrat from Maine or Massachusetts. What is that? Maine, Massachusetts, and referred to the House Judiciary Committee, in which it just get buried. Okay, because it's caught up in they trying to run the clock out. Okay, but somehow they got these billions of dollars to fund these scams of these Somalians, and billions of dollars of funds, that the Doge found with the Department of Education and all that. So they do have the money, and with all the treaties and tariffs that the president is bragging about. So it's time to keep that same energy and push the line right now, because I truly believe he will make this thing happen, because he's tired of the Democratic Party. And we got to realize that, the lesser of the two evils, like I said, Jesus didn't come to change the scribe of the Pharisees. So for us to be, working with the Democratic Party as a whole, seem like we're working for our demise, but we're seeking our independence and our freedom, and it's on the books. So let's start declaring ourselves as the freedmen and go with who we are, the Black Negroes, who was the Black natives who are still waiting on that promise today. Now, question, how many times has HR 40 been introduced? HR 40 has been repeatedly introduced in every Congress since 1989. Think about that. If it's not real, then why do we continue to introduce it, in Congress? It's like, just go ahead and do it just to make it seem like we did something. Kind of like that apology that Gavin Newsom did. No cash payouts, but an apology, meaning an acknowledgement. Now that you acknowledged it, you opened Pandora's box. So now, we're about to get in that rabbit hole, and we're about to make this claim on a federal level. And we're going to take this straight to the president, in these days and times. And we're going to move on. We're going to end racism, because the only reason racism exists is because we're not separate and equal. We're separate and unequal, because a lot of individuals, you get your money, you get that dream job, you come up, you cannot invest in your community. You cannot live in your community. You got to go somewhere else and find like minds. But we want to build and buy the block and become an asset instead of a liability, and begin to thrive in this nation and show the world who we are. So how many times has HR 40 been introduced? Now, HR 40 has been introduced repeatedly in every Congress since 1989. Okay, the first introduced in 1989 by Representative John Conyers, Jr., Democrat from Michigan. Okay, now let me see here. Conyers reintroduced the bill in every congressional session through 2017, about 2 years after his retirement. After Conyers retired, Sheila Jackson Lee took up the proposal and sponsored and reintroduced HR 40 into Congress, including on 3 different occasions in 2019 through 2021. Now, in the 119th Congress, because Sheila Jackson Lee has passed. Let me see here. Representative Ayanna Pressley reintroduced the bill again. So it was last introduced in January of 2025. But who's going to introduce it this year? See, this is a year they're moving on because, all of these distractions, because this is the opportunity that the people's going to pick it up, because they have set up a trail for us to continue this fight, and we can and we will. Now, counting all sessions, because Conyers introduced in every Congress since 1989 to 2019, and 89 is the year I graduated high school. Then Jackson Lee and now Pressley has continued the bill and introduced multiple times across more than 3 decades. So at least 2 years for more than 15 congressional times estimate to put the numbers that the bill since 1989 has been introduced between 15 and 20 times. reparations, just introduced, but it just stalls right there. Okay, and I looked it up on the Congress.gov website, and it has been introduced, and it is what it is. Has it become law? No. Okay, in closing, okay, because this is number one, and then number two is going to be the continuous of number one. So if you miss something, go back to number one, watch them in order, because we're going to build this case, this class action lawsuit. I'm going to come with videos, because I got a video of Johnny Cochran saying put together a team, and put a class action lawsuit to sue the federal government. And we can't do it by being Democrats. We got to do it as nonpartisan American citizens from a tribal perspective. And as those 5 black tribes that they try to, eliminate out of the treaties. And that's going to be our saving grace. OK, and that's going to be our conversation. Has it ever become law? No. H.R. 40 has never passed both chambers or signed into law. It has gained attention and has advanced further than before. Now, for an example, out of the committee in 2020, but it has not been enacted. And that's where the people, that's where I'm going to stop. And I'm going to start the next one, on, the continuance of what I've just talked about. So listen, like I said, if you want to be in the know, if your birth certificate says Negro or colored, which is the same thing, okay, and that means there's some direct compensation coming. And we're going to have these conversations moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and close it out. We've been a little bit over 30 minutes. So I'm going to go close it out right now. And then just hit that like, hit that notification. And thank you to my new subscribers. Thank you to the new followers. We're on our way to 100,000 followers on a Better Black America talk radio show on Facebook. It's a group. So if you haven't, go ahead and follow and subscribe there, and we're going to have this conversation. With that being said, have an amazing day. I'm your man, Bushan Glover. And like I said, like these kids be talking about, run us our money. With that being said, we're going to have this conversation. So see y'all next time. A Better Black America TV, a Better Black America Talk Radio Show. I'm your host, Bushan Glover, signing out. Peace out.